Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be starting a new series called What I've Been Reading. Obviously I do a lot of like movie, TV show related content, and I've never really talked or gone into any detail about what I've been reading, and I thought this would be a fun series to start because as much as I love my movies and I loved TV shows, I do like to read. I do like books. I'm just not a giant avid reader. I definitely can't read a book in like a day. So I was thinking about this video for a while. I thought, do I want to do like just like an annual wrap up or like a quarterly wrap up like I do with my movies? And I was like, okay, I already do a ton of different like annual videos at the beginning and the end of every single year. I don't want to add another one onto all of that. So I decided to do, once I've read 10 books, I will report back to you my ratings, my rankings, and talk about these books that I've read. For the majority of the books I've read, I get a lot of my recommendations from my best friend Tori. She is a beyond avid reader. Like, there's avid readers and then there's Tori. So I get a lot of my recommendations from her because she reads a whole bunch of like everything. She's very kind with her recommendations in the sense that if she recommends something and I listen to it and I don't like it, she's just like, okay. There have definitely been many people in my life where they've recommended something to me, and if I don't like it, they're almost like offended, as if I've personally offended them because I didn't like what they recommended. And so I really like when Tori recommends stuff to me because I don't feel like pressure to really like it or anything. And there's one book in particular that I will get into that I know Tori really enjoyed, that she recommended to me, that I really just didn't enjoy. But I will tell you where I was recommended these books and just tell you all about them. So let's just get started. So I do record everything I've read in my agenda, and I do write just a little bit of a brief bit about them in my agenda, but obviously I'll be going into more detail. And I also write in here when I started a book and when I finished a book, so I know exactly how long it took me, because it's funny because some of these it was like, wow, that took me a really long time to read, and then other books I'm like, that took me like 2 weeks to read. So the first book I read this year was Brotherhood by Mark Chen. This is a Star Wars book. I've read 2 Star Wars books so far this year that I will include in this video, and this was the first one. So this one takes place between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So Anakin is no longer a Padawan. He is a full Jedi Knight, and he is secretly married to Padme. I loved this book because I really enjoyed seeing just the obviousness that it was Padme and Anakin's relationship, because I always joke about that. I always joke about how obvious their relationship was, especially in like the Clone Wars and stuff, and especially that you can totally tell that Obi-Wan is fully aware of what is going on, and I really enjoyed that you could really see that in this book. Like, I thought it was hilarious. But on top of that, it's also about Obi-Wan going to Cato Neo, I'm not saying this right, Cato Moidia, to try to resolve a conflict that is going on there, and he is wrongfully imprisoned, and it is about Anakin trying to find him and release him. I really like the callback of this because if you remember in Revenge of the Sith, there is a part at the very beginning of the movie where they return to Coruscant, and Anakin says to Obi-Wan that this was the 5th or something time that he saved him. Obi-Wan says 4th time that business on Cato Moidia doesn't count. And so I thought it was really interesting because I was like, hey, this was the business on Cato Moidia. So I really liked this book. I mean, it's really hard for me to not like a Star Wars book, but I really enjoyed this one. Thought it was really good. I absolutely love the dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Like, literally anything between the two of them I am all about. I will read, I will digest anything Anakin and Obi-Wan related. Yes, I know they're not like a couple, but they are my favorite pairing of Star Wars in general, and I love anything that will ever come out about them. So I gave this 4 stars. I really liked this. Also, I will rank books out of 5 stars. I know I do movies out of 10 stars, but I just do books out of 5 because movies I will rank on like IMDb where I have 10 stars, but books I do on Goodreads where I only have 5. So books are out of 5 stars, movies are out of 10 stars. Okay, moving on. So the next book I listened to was The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, I really apologize. I was very interested in this book initially because it is a Reylo fanfic, and I will, same thing with anything to do with Anakin and Obi-Wan, I will digest anything Reylo related, and this was probably my second favorite Reylo that I have ever listened to. I gave this 4 stars and I'm very excited for the second one to come out. I absolutely loved the characters in this book, and I feel like this one definitely had the most like Star Wars elements to it, where most of the other Reylos I've read, which now that I'm thinking about it, I've only read 2 other Reylo books, but the other 2 I've read are just basically the characters look like Kylo Ren and Rey from the sequel trilogies. This one actually had some like Star Wars-esque type things going on, in the sense that the main female character is able to, I think it's like bend the light, they said, where the male main character is able to bend the darkness, something like that. It's been a little while since I've read this book, but I think that's kind of ish the idea. And also it's mentioned that she is one of the very few people in the world, in this world, who they have discovered who can bend the light. Obviously it's very reminiscent to the fact that in the sequel trilogy, the like Jedi have completely died out and there's like no more Jedi left, and Rey is able to still somehow channel the Force. So it's very similar to that. Even like the first moment we meet the male character, it was just so reminiscent of Kylo Ren, and I just loved it. It's definitely enemies to lovers, even though there's only brief moments of lovers and just majority of it is enemies, but I loved it and I'm very excited for the next one to come out. I think it comes out sometime in maybe like November or December, so I'm very, very excited for that book. When the second one does come out, I do think I want to re-listen to The Hurricane Wars again, just to like get it wrapped around my head, everything that's going on, because especially when there's been so much time between such heavy fantasy stories, I tend to forget the world building and all of that. So when the second one does come out, I definitely want to re-listen to The Hurricane Wars before I dive into the second one. Whenever that one does come out, I'm very excited for it. Then I started the trilogy, I think it's called the Cursebreaker trilogy, and the first book is called A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This book was recommended to me by Tori, and I read the entire trilogy, and let's talk about the first book. I liked the first book. Tori sold this to me as a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it definitely was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I actually found this more Beauty and the Beast-esque than even like A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I know a lot of people compare that first book to Beauty and the Beast. I found this one was definitely like more Beauty and the Beast-ish than A Court of Thorns and Roses. So this one follows Ren and Harper. Obviously there's a curse on Ren and he is trying to break it with the power of love, and he wants like Harper to fall in love with him. But what I really liked about this book is that they tell her that there's a curse. They tell her that there's this curse, and she figures out for herself that love is what will break this curse. Even though she knows that, she still doesn't like force herself to fall in love with Ren or anything. Like she's very much like, okay, that's cool that there's this curse going on, but I still don't plan on falling in love with you. And just through Ren just being sweet to her and doing certain things, that she does fall in love with him. So it's very cute. I did like it. It did end on a cliffhanger, which I will get into with the next book, but actually the next book I ended up reading was A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller, and this was my second Star Wars book of the year. This book followed a very young Kanan and a young Hera. This is the story of kind of how they met and how they kind of formed a relationship, as well as started their path towards the Ghost Squad and all that stuff, because at the beginning of this book, he is just kind of is doing his own thing, minding his own business, and it's not until he runs into Hera that she kind of convinces him that they need to do more and they need to stand up against the Empire. As we know from Rebels, Kanan was a Jedi in training and his master was killed, so now he's a Jedi in hiding. So he still has his lightsaber and he still has his Force abilities, but he is definitely hiding those things because obviously he doesn't want to get found by the Empire. And it's not until the very end of this book that he shows those things to Hera. He's very much set in his world that he is just going to hide from the Empire. He just goes from job to job hiding. And she, meanwhile, is trying to dig deep into certain things to eventually bring down the Empire. She's the same Hera that she always was in Rebels. She is there to bring down the Empire. Kanan is not, but she basically convinces him because he very instantly falls in love with Hera. She doesn't fall in love with him instantly. She does not like him right off the bat. Even though it's risky for him to continue on with her, it's the decisions that they make together that he eventually realizes he should stay with her and he should work with her, and they are going to take down the Empire together. And I really like this. I love Kanan and Hera from Rebels. It is definitely my favorite animated Star Wars show. I cried when Kanan died in Rebels, and I was very happy when Hera was brought back into Ahsoka because I love her. So I was very excited when I saw that this book was a thing, and I dove right into it as soon as I could. Like I said, I even went from the first book of a series that ended on a cliffhanger to this book without hesitation because that's how much I love Kanan and Hera. So with that being said, I moved on to the second book of the Cursebreaker trilogy, and that is called A Heart So Fierce and Broken. This obviously picks up from the cliffhanger, and I don't want to go too much into the second and third book because if you're interested in these books, I don't want to give too much away. The second book actually takes place from two different people's point of views. Where the first book took place from Ren and Harper's point of view, this one takes place from two different people's point of view. And I actually really liked the turn that this book took. Obviously, the first book, like I said, was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. With this book on, there's no Beauty and the Beast left in sight. There is nothing to do with Beauty and the Beast left in these stories. I was fine with that in the second book. Come the third book, A Vow So Bold and Deadly, I was bored out of my mind. I'm actually surprised how quickly I finished this book. Like looking at my little thing where I put where I started and where I finished this book, it only took me 11 days to finish this book. And honestly, I just think that's just because I just wanted to get it over with. I did not like the third book. And this was something Tori and I both agreed on. We really didn't like the third book. It was a lot of build up to literally nothing. And I even put my favorite part in this book was just like bickering between two particular characters that I won't name or say anything about at the very end. I loved when these two characters were like bickering back and forth with each other. That was the best part of the book. And it was probably one page of the entire book after, again, just so much build up to something that didn't end up happening. I was so disappointed in this book. I only gave it 2 stars. And then the next book I listened to that Tori recommended was the first book in the Crescent City trilogy, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Honestly, I also didn't like this book. This was the one book that I mentioned that I was really nervous because Tori recommended it to me and I listened to it and I was like chatting with her throughout it. But in honest truth, I was like, it's just not for me. As much as I really liked the Hurricane Wars, I think part of the reason I was able to get through the fantasy elements of that book was the fact that it was a Reylo, as like ridiculous as that sounds. Other than that, I am not a fantasy reader at all. Yes, I read the first 3 books of the ACOTAR series. The 4th book I started and I honestly hated it. I did not finish the 4th book. I hated it so bad. I could not get into it, and I know people have said like when you get further in it gets better, but I just could not handle it. That's a different story for another time, but I tried to give this one a chance. I listened to the entire book. I print off the covers of the books to put in my agenda, and I even have stored away in the back here the other 2 books that I printed off to eventually like put in here with House of Earth and Blood. But I don't think it's gonna happen because I just can't see myself continuing on. I just was so underwhelmed the entire time I listened to that book. And this one, you can tell where A Vow So Bold and Deadly, I just wanted to get it over with, so that's why I was able to get through it so quickly. But this one, it took me over a month to listen to. Yes, it's a very long book. It just dragged and dragged, and just so much going on that I just didn't feel was necessary. I could be wrong. Maybe these things will come up in the 2nd and 3rd book. And even saying how I will definitely reread the Hurricane Wars before I listen to the 2nd one. It's been 5 books at this point since I've read House of Earth and Blood, and if I were to continue, I would feel the need to read that one again, and that fact alone is like making it even more of a chore to want to get to the 2nd one. So I just didn't like it. It just wasn't my thing. I didn't like the characters at all. I have listened to books where characters are like assholes, like Bryce was. I thought Bryce was such an asshole. I've listened to books where characters are assholes. One of my favorite book series of all times, the main character is the biggest dick in the whole world. But I don't mind it because I like the story. And Bryce was just such an asshole, and I didn't like her, and the story wasn't worth sticking around to continue on with her assholeness. And that's also the reason I didn't like the 4th ACOTAR book, was because Nesta is an asshole. I will probably, more likely than not continue on with the Crescent City trilogy. From there, I moved on and I listened to the book Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I am aware of Ali Hazelwood because she wrote, I don't want to say the first Reylo to ever be published, but it was the first one I was aware of. The first Reylo I was ever aware of that was published was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I actually really enjoyed that book. I know a lot of people did not. And again, maybe I just liked it because it was Reylo. Who knows? I listened to Bride, and honestly, I just wasn't super duper impressed. Again, I wasn't a giant fan of the main character in this book. Also, the narrator of this book who narrated the female character, I didn't like her narrating. I didn't think she did a good job. Also, I hated that her name was Misery. I was like, what? Why is her name Misery? Little things like that can really like not necessarily ruin, but just like give me a really bad impression right off the bat in a book, is when the characters have horrible names like Misery. And again, I listen to books, I read books with my ears, not with my eyes. So when the narrator isn't very good, it also kind of takes me out of the book. The story was cute. It was about a vampire who marries a werewolf. It was cute. There was some lore to it. I just, again, didn't love the female main character. I thought she was kind of obnoxious. Probably wouldn't read this book again, but I would definitely continue reading Ali Hazelwood stuff. I really enjoyed The Love Hypothesis. I've read another book by her, I think Love Theoretically. I liked Love Hypothesis more than the other one, but she has some other ones that I definitely are interested in checking out. So interested in reading more books by her to see if it's just the Reylo effect that I enjoyed the Love Hypothesis, or if I actually do enjoy this author. Then I read the book Appetite for Innocence by Lucinda Berry. I was interested in this book from TikTok. It was described to me as a deep psychological thriller. It is about 2 girls. There's 2 different POVs. One is Sarah, and she was kidnapped by a man 10 or more years ago. She is very much in the frame of mind that this is her home and this is where she belongs. And even though this man kidnaps other girls and does horrible things to them, this is normal. This is her world. This man kidnaps girls and does horrible things to them. Usually right away, he disposes of them after he does these horrible things to them. He gets rid of them, and Sarah he has kept for all of these years. So Sarah has been there for many, many years, and then the other POV is Ella, who is his most recent girl he has kidnapped. And it goes back and forth between both girls as well as between when Ella gets kidnapped and when she is living in this home that she has been kidnapped into. Also goes into the present, which is when the girls have been rescued. I gave this 1 star. It was disturbing. There was definitely some very disturbing scenes that would make people not want to read this book. Definitely check trigger warnings on this book. But in my opinion, it was just not at all what was described. There was nothing psychological about it. It was very plain and dry what was going on in this book, and the ending was supposed to be a crazy twist. Like literally, I went back to the TikTok that I saw that recommended this to me, and it was like the ending will like throw you for a loop, and I was like, will it though? Will it? It wasn't bad. It was not what I was expecting. I would not have read this book had I known that it was just going to be very, I wouldn't say normal, because the events in this book are not normal, what happens to these girls. If I had known that that was all it was going to be, I 100% would not have read this. I read this because I thought it sounded disturbing. I was interested in listening to a disturbing book, but I also wanted something like to like mess with my mind and also like end with a crazy twist, and it did neither of those things. And honestly, I did not like the characters. Obviously, they're not going to be like perfect happy-go-lucky characters when this is the situation that they are living in, but I just did not like either of the characters. Then the last book that I read that I'm going to talk about was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I really enjoyed this book. This is a book that definitely would not be for everyone because it definitely has some heavy themes similar to the last book. This book is about a young girl. Again, it takes place between her past and her present, and eventually the 2 timelines match up together. But in her past, when she was 15 years old, she was groomed and touched inappropriately by her older teacher. She is very much living in the mindset that he loves her because, as I said, he was grooming her. She believes he loves her, and even as we go into her future, she to this day still believes that he loves her, even though it's come out that he's done these things to other girls, that he did those things to these other girls because he was lonely, but in truth, he still only ever loved her. It is a very disturbing book. It is very well written. It is so good. And unlike the last book, I didn't find the main character, Vanessa, annoying. I didn't understand what she was going through because luckily for, I guess, for myself, that has never happened to me in my life. But when she did do like shitty things in her life, it made more sense based on what was going on. It was just written a lot better than the last book was, where in the last book, when Ella did shitty things, I was like, oh, get over yourself, Ella. Like, shut up. Where in this book, when Vanessa, the main character, did shitty things, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I don't know if it was just the writing in comparison to the other book, but something about this book, like obviously they're similar in the sense that it's like a young girl has horrible things happen to her by an older man. Obviously, they're different in the sense that this one is about a girl who was groomed by her teacher, and that one is just straight up about a man kidnapping girls and doing horrible things to them. They're very different situations, but they're also somewhat similar, and I just liked the way My Dark Vanessa was written and told so much more than the other books. So if you are looking for a book that isn't happy, will upset you, and be disturbing, I would definitely recommend My Dark Vanessa over the other one. Don't bother with that one. My Dark Vanessa, I gave 4 stars, and I think I mentioned the other one I gave 1 star. So that is going to be it for this video. That is the last 10 books I've read. I've actually read 2.5 more books. I just decided to just do 10 for now, just to keep it a nice even number. Also, based on how long I'm filming, I think that's a good number to end on. So I've already have 2.5 books in my bank for the next time I do this video. I hope you like this video. Like I said, I obviously don't talk about books very often or anything, but I do have a Goodreads account if you ever wanted to like follow along and see what I've been reading. I hope you like this new series. I'm very excited about it because I've been listening to and reading some really great things that I'm very excited about. The current book I'm listening to, I am powering through it because I am loving it. That is going to be it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, I would love it if you would like and subscribe. I post new videos every single Friday and I would love to have you here. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye everybody.